Hey, everybody, and welcome once again to the Fart Fetish Podcast. It's that podcast where we seek to find the answers to the what, where, how, and sometimes why of fart fetish, and try to help give a nuanced picture of the people that have fetishes. I'm your host, Raj. Watch for new episodes on the first Friday of the month at fartfetishpodcast.com and on most major podcast platforms. You can financially support the show for free by checking out the ad supported erotic fart content at thefartcloset.com. Today on the podcast, we're joined by Xara, who candidly opens up about her journey of embracing kink and fetish as an empowering force in her life. We delve into how childhood taboos and societal expectations shaped her unique desires, explore the liberating dynamics of dominant roles, and discuss the importance of breaking shame cycles around sexual expression. With honesty, humor, and depth, Zara offers a rare and refreshing take on navigating fetishism, self confidence, and creating spaces for genuine exploration. Thanks very much for being here, Zara. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, including what does this fetish and sexuality look like for you?
Hello, yes, definitely. So, a little bit about myself is, so obviously my name is Zara. I'm 26. I live in south of England, and I've grown up in that area as well. So not never sort of strayed too far, from home. In terms of the sort of sexuality and fetish and things like that, for me, I would say that, um. Similar to sexuality, fetishes and kink can be quite a spectrum, really. I find that for some people it's very clear, and for other people it's a lot more ranging and very context dependent as well. I kind of think as adults we're sort of taught to stop playing and not really have fun in that kind of way with other people. So I think that sexuality and fetishes is a really great way for adults to be creative and play with each other in a way that's pleasurable and fun. Yeah.
Nice. What was the first word you used? You said it was you said it was ranging. But what was the other word you used?
Oh, so I'd say sort of one end is quite straightforward, where
I
it's
see.
it's sort of where people sort of there's one thing that they like and they like it in a certain context, whereas I find other people are a lot more flexible and do have fetishes, but are also quite malleable, which can be a lot of fun.
Sure. And when you mean malleable, you mean to like sexuality in general, maybe other fetishes or other sexualities or other things like that.
Yes, I find that they can overlap quite a lot as well. Like for example, if um, someone has a foot fetish and they get a lot of pleasure off of smells and things like that, there's a good chance they're also going to be quite aroused and excited by other things that create smell, whether it be sweat or farting or anything sort of in that realm. Whereas other people are very set on like this is what is arousing to me, and everything else is sort of doesn't really matter.
In your experience, and this is I know I understand it's partially a guess, but in your experience, have you found that's due to lack of experience, or people are like, I only want to try my fetish, I don't want to know if I like new things, and that's it, or people just haven't gotten the opportunity, or what do you think? Maybe it's a mixture.
I think it's kind of because I know it sounds stereotypical, but I'm definitely not the first to say this, but I feel like we sort of live in a, a setting socially where a lot of people want instant gratification. So um, it can be a bit impatient, I think, and sometimes just want the one thing they know will bring them pleasure, and are just less flexible. And I don't know if that comes from, yeah, that determination to just get the pleasure they want, or whether it's a matter of being scared to try other things. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I've never really asked.
Yeah, well, it just a curiosity because yeah, I hadn't had anyone mention that sort of flexibility and rigidity before, so I was kind of curious about it. What about you? What aspects, themes, scenarios, things do you enjoy around this fetish?
So quite a lot actually. I think. I'm quite flexible when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like, there are definitely things that um, I find very attractive and appealing about it, which is definitely sort of the classic scenario where it's like a beautiful woman doing something that's deemed to be disgusting. I just find it really captivating, whether it's myself or whether it's another person. I just think it feels like something you shouldn't be witnessing. So then it sort of makes you excited to indulge in that over and over again. Um, there's also so many ways I feel like you can go with it because for some people it is that um, appeal of sort of having the girlfriend experience of having somebody who's really comfortable around you. For other people, it's a big part of sort of domination, like they enjoy being an object and treated like a chair or a toilet, depending on their interest. Um, so it can be quite wide ranging. I think, like any fetish, the person who enjoys them doesn't necessarily have to be dominant or submissive because I truly believe that any act, whether it be deemed sexual or not, can be performed in a dominant or submissive way. And in terms of that, if if a person wanted their partner to be gassy, they could do that in a dominant way by purposely like feeding them foods that would make them gassy. And or putting them in scenarios where it would be more likely to occur, or they could be take a more submissive role, where they're being suffocated, or doing body worship. So I think there's a lot of ways to explore it. Personally, I do enjoy taking more of a dominant role with it, but I do think it's fun that all types of fetishes can be explored with so many different dynamics.
For sure. For sure. And to clarify, when you say a dominant role with it, you as a farter, as a sniffer, what role do you generally take in the dominant role? Because I know it says weird to be
Mm.
dominant sniffer, but I know it is possible to like top from the bottom, as it were.
Completely. Like for me, it would be I would be the one fasting that other the partner would be receiving,
Okay.
just from my experience. Yeah, it's interesting. It's never been really something for me. It's like the sound is the most appealing and attractive thing. So I've never um like switched up roles.
Gotcha. Totally understand. Do you have any other kinks related or unrelated to fart fetish?
So many.
Uh,
I don't know. I'll try and be very like quick. Um, for me, I really like anything that sort of involves um like air. I think I really like queefing as well. I like feeling full of air and then pushing it all out feels really satisfying. The feeling, the sort of vibration that you get from it as well, whether it be from um your asshole or your pussy, it just feels good. That sort of release is very relaxing. I think it's similar to that sort of, I guess, meditation when you practice tension and release. It feels very good for your body. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I have explored and a lot of things that I want to explore. A big part for me is definitely um, fandom I absolutely adore. Um, I used to take a really submissive role when I was quite a lot younger because I just thought that's what men wanted, and at the time I was just very much trying to appeal to men. Whereas now that's kind of the opposite of what I want to do. I really enjoy um, taking that role in any sort of sexual act. I enjoy being the one who's in charge, and that has been a really sort of big sexual awakening for me over the past few years. Um, it's brought me so much pleasure and really been quite shocking to me to realize that I was sort of limiting myself in terms of receiving pleasure because I was just doing what I thought I was meant to do as a woman and just sort of be in that submissive role. Whereas now I'm so confident that if I would switch for somebody, it would be a very rare occasion now. But yeah, I definitely much prefer to be dominant. like dominating.
For sure. How long approximately have you been dominating for? Whether professionally, amateurly, whatever capacity.
So I would say probably within the past few years. So like really new to it in terms of I think I just felt so much sort of shame around those wants, and I was oftentimes like discouraged by sexual partners even with sort of what I would consider more, I guess this sounds awful, but basic sort of
Hmm.
like sexual play in terms of like, if I was taking the lead with kissing, I would sometimes be told, um it feels like I'm trying to lead a dance with you, Zara, and you keep leading. Even though it's like that's what I want to do and I like that feeling. But those sort of things where, people say offhanded comments and then that can just like really um make you feel unsettled and then stop doing that.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, that sometimes can be rare of in this gender dichotomy we have that the woman taking the lead, and I guess
Mm.
some men, many men are not as prepared for it, or as like I don't know what you need to be prepared for. Like it seems pretty desirable to have somebody else take the lead, at least in my opinion, but I guess not everyone is of that mindset. Can you talk a bit
Mm.
how you got oh, I'm sorry, did you have something to add there?
No, I
Okay.
just agree.
Sure, sure. Can I talk to you a bit about your background? How did you, what is your background in how you got started with your interest in farting, and what was your experience at the time?
So it's sort of, I mean, classically was something that started when I was quite young. And I'm very aware that, people can adopt fetishes and sexual interests at a later stage. I don't think that, you have any less of a fetish if it develops later. But so I was probably around maybe 13 or 14 and became really good friends with this girl called Ruby. And so in my family, any sort of like farting, burping, anything within that realm was really like um just punished. So not in like an extreme way, but my mum um would berate us for doing that, and that would be then like me and my siblings wouldn't really do that in front of each other, um unless it was like in private, and my my dad like would be free to do that, but my mum would still sort of like tell him off, and it was just sort of an odd thing. So we just yeah, we would try not to do that kind of thing, but it's hard like to do that as a human being when you're spending a lot of time with people. But yeah, so when I met Ruby, I went round her house and spent time with her and her mum, and both of them would start very openly. And it was really shocking to me because not only, was I seeing a girl my age doing something that I would be told off for, like her mum was almost encouraging her as well. And I just thought like part of me was like, this is insane. Like this is wild. But then another part of me was like, this is amazing and I need to be here all the time because this is great. Um So as my sort of relationship sort of developed further with Ruby, she would always say to me, you never, why don't you fart in front of me? And I would just say, that's I just don't, I'm just been taught not to do that, so I've not been doing that. But she was very encouraging and was like, well, if you need to, you can. And then I started doing that, and then she was like, I think we should have some competitions together. um, and that felt really naughty and like, I don't know, disobedient, I guess. And then whenever we would see each other, whether it be I was at her house or if she was at mine, obviously only if she was at mine, it would only be in my bedroom, but we would have farting competitions together. And it was just, it felt very naughty, very intimate, really exciting. And yeah, just something that I wanted to keep. Um, enjoying. But yeah, so that sort of, I think that really sparked things for me in terms of creating a fetish because I think that sort of excitement I was experiencing at the time was actually arousal, and I just didn't realize because I was quite young. But um, after then, whenever I would have sleepovers with any of my other female friends, and usually ones that I was already crushing on or thought were attractive, um, then I would be trying to encourage them. I'd just be like, "Oh, like we should do this. It's like so fun and funny and normal, and we should definitely do that." And then we went together, and it just felt like, I don't know, it felt amazing that like I got to experience these women in a way that nobody else did. And we had this sort of naughty secret between us. Um, but then, yeah, as I got older and there was more focus on having boyfriends and things like that, I didn't bring it up anymore. There wasn't really any sort of moment where I was like, I'm officially not going to do this anymore. I think it's just there wasn't really that time. Girls weren't interested in just sleepovers anymore. It was more like, going out and meeting boys, and then the sleepover would just be tired and go to sleep. That it just wouldn't happen anymore. Um, so yeah, that's sort of where everything began, I think.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's great that you had that nurturing environment, especially after having for this fetish at least, the a home that was not nurturing in that way. So that's great. That's great that you had that time to blossom because I think a lot of people either have it in their own way or don't have it at all. Especially early
Mm,
on, they have to make it. They can make their fetish part of what they missed in their youth. For some, is there any like media, TV, film stuff that you remember watching in your youth or formative years that had like farting as a prominent staple?
definitely. So my parents, were quite strict about what we could watch on TV. So we would often just only watch kids' films, and obviously, kids' films have a lot of humor related to flatulence and things like that. So, that was very prominent, especially, films like Shrek and stuff like that, which is just an iconic film anyway. It's one of the best films in my opinion, but would watch that all the time. And there was also this film that it's rated terribly, and I'm sure it's awful. I haven't watched it since I was a child, but I really remember it. And remember being like, I want to be that boy. Because there was this film. I can't even remember what it's called, but it was about this boy who like used to fart lots, and then he was like planning on farting himself to the moon or something. And, like, it had, Rupert Grinton from, like, Harry Potter, and, yeah, I remember watching that when I was a kid and being like, "Why am I so captivated by this, and why do I want that to be my future career, to be going into space with my own farts?" But, yeah, I think yeah, it comes up a lot, even in, like, TV series, things like that. I feel like it's a very prominent thing, so being only able to really watch that, I was kind of restricted in terms of getting to watch films that had, sort of more standard sex in, because until I was much older. So I think, like, I was experiencing sort of a lot of frustration and arousal, not knowing what to do with it, because even the internet, if I searched like how to masturbate, like nothing would come up because it had blocks on from my parents. So I just, I think I was experiencing that and not really having anywhere to put it. So um, then I was seeing something that I knew was like naughty, in terms of like my parents would be, well, my mum would be like, we don't do that. But I was allowed to watch it. So I think that probably helped.
For sure. For sure. That makes sense. And you'd mentioned you had sort of this waning comfortability around farting as you got older. But you'd also talked about in your messages to me that some of that confidence maybe came back when you were with your when you were in your first relationship with your first boyfriend. Do you know what maybe changed there? I mean, was it merely just amount of time in the relationship, or what made you comfortable at a certain point?
I think I didn't really have a choice because
Hmm.
we were spending so much time together that I was like, I can't. I can't be holding in farts for this long, like, I will die somehow. Like, it was just painful, so I was like, "I'm gonna have to do it at some point." I remember having a very, very formal conversation with him where I was like, I'm gonna have to fart in front of you at some point. This is not sustainable as a relationship." So then, yeah, I did start doing that. But he, yeah, was not very did not encourage that. I felt very like back to square one in a way. I was kind of embarrassed about the way that he was sort of like realized that I was quite a gassy person, and because I have that thing, it's called something specifically, but I can't burp basically, so I just fart like twice as much as like a standard person. So I think it was quite maybe just jarring for him. And like his family had quite sort of traditional values, which I don't like myself, but surrounding sort of attitudes towards women. So it was kind of like he would be like, "God, like, do you have to?" And then, so that kind of made me not want to do that
For sure.
anymore.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Was his first reaction, like the first time you'd let him in on this secret, any different than his like later reactions of more persistent farting, as it were? I mean, it's a dumb thing to say, but
I think he was shocked the
sure.
first time because it was just so loud and long, and I think he was like, "What the fuck?" Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, so I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, 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 of course.
And I was just like, "Yeah, that's gonna be happening often, unfortunately, if you're gonna date me." So, um, yeah, and then it just was kind of like, yeah, I just remember he was like, I think once we were together and he was just like, "You need like just like that your parents are gonna hear and like that's gonna be really weird." And I was just like, "I think I'm allowed to fart in my bedroom." But yeah, so it just sort of it was being really discouraged and I didn't really like that feeling.
Of course. No, that makes sense. Well, thankfully, you also mentioned your second boyfriend was much more positive, even encouraging, you'd said. Can you talk more about that experience and how that felt?
Yeah, that was a lot more fun in terms of that. Like I remember the first time I farted in front of him was an accident and it was a very embarrassing one. He was fingering me. And I think it was just because I was tensing and I was so relaxed. Um, Let out a very just a small fart, but it was very loud and he was he was just like, "I'm gonna have to acknowledge that." And I just remember being like, "You don't though. You could just pretend that didn't happen." Um, and we were just laughing, and then he was like, "Would you like me to continue fingering you?" And I was like, "Yeah, preferably. Let's just do that." And then when I saw him afterwards, I remember being like, "I'm so embarrassed," because that's like the worst time to have done that. Um, and I don't know, I just maybe we should just break up. And he was like, "No, obviously we shouldn't break up because you farted." Like, but then he was quite a playful person, and then he picked me up and chucked me over his shoulder. Um, and lo and behold, I accidentally farted again. So that which he thought was absolutely hilarious and basically was like, "So you're a squeaky toy. You just if you're squeezed or if there's just any sort of tension, you will just fart." And I was like, "That is correct." But I'd really rather it not be the case. And then after that, I just remember saying to him that like if we are gonna continue dating, like I will be farting a lot. So that will just be part of it. And he was like, "That's fine, you're a human being, so you're allowed to do that." Um, but then things sort of I couldn't tell if like he was aroused by it or if it was just something he just found funny. But as like time went on, he was very like encouraging of it, and sort of would almost like even brag about it to friends, like would be like, "Zara can fart so much more than me. Like she's very good at farting." And I'd be like, "Don't tell people this." But it was just, yeah, it just kind of felt a lot more fun. Like he'd oftentimes um even take me to restaurants and like comment on the fact that he knew this that what I'd order or what he would encourage me to order would definitely be making me gassy. So it was kind of like an unsaid thing that we would enjoy together. Um And yeah, it would oftentimes be that then when I'd farted a lot around him, he'd know that I would be really aroused and he would seemingly also be. So then we would just have kind of standard sex after that. But it became like quite a routine and it was just something we never verbally acknowledged, but were just enjoying together. So that was interesting. It definitely got me feeling a lot more happy and relaxed in terms of that and feeling like being very sure that I didn't want to date somebody who was so appalled by farting because to me it's something so mundane and just normal. So it just, yeah, that definitely changed things.
That's great. That's really awesome. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that. Do you'd mentioned in our messages that you identify as bisexual. Do you extend that feeling, or does that feeling extend to the fetish and farting, or do you generally stick to enjoyment of women farting, or being the farter, or what kind of maybe break down that nuance a little more for me?
So for me, as long as I'm the one farting, I'm happy.
Mm.
So, doesn't gender doesn't really matter to me. Like I'm attracted to people really. So, um, yeah, for me, I definitely prefer people who are submissive, no matter what their gender. But also, I do get aroused by women farting. I wouldn't say so much like on me, but if it was around me, I definitely would be aroused by it, but it's quite specific. I find that it's like it's only if I'm attracted to them. So if it's just if it's a person who I perceive to be a platonic relationship and I, recognize they're a beautiful person, but I'm not attracted to them, if they were too far in front of me, I wouldn't feel anything. Whereas like with people that I'm attracted to, it definitely is more exciting and arousing. Um, there is definitely a little bit of me that finds it attractive when men do it, but less so just because there's not that societal element where it's like they've been discouraged from doing it. Like even at school, like if a guy was to fart, everyone would just laugh, but if a girl was to do it, they would be immediately shamed. So I definitely am a lot more interested in women doing it when it comes to the fetish. But also, you know, having had partners, definitely encourage them to fart if they need to. Mainly because I would want to have a competition with them to prove that I can fart more. So yeah, it's definitely a shared thing.
For sure, that makes sense. Yeah, context definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me, I'm very similar. Not that I'm running into, people, random friends, whatever, that are just farting randomly, but yeah, certainly there's an arousal in a more dominating or sexual context rather than
Mm.
just like, oh, here's a fart. Even like video wise, it's like, oh, here's someone farting in a more like girlfriend experience, and I'm not
Mm.
as drawn to that. You'd mentioned an experience in our emails about a roommate you had at university. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, so it's quite funny because so after that relationship with that other person ended, I was very much it got very complicated because that relationship with that past person actually got very unfortunately really abusive. And in terms of him abusing me, not the other way around, definitely wouldn't be bragging about something like that. But so that got really tumultuous and hard and yeah ended up with me breaking up with him twice and it being very very hard, very painful experience. But then I felt like because he had made sex, this like standard sex, so violent, um that like it almost like locked in my fetish because that was a time where I wasn't being abused. It was just I was just being afforded like kindness and humor and stuff like that. So then when that ended, I was very sort of shook up about that and I found dating really hard, um, and sex quite difficult. But I really wanted to get that sexual gratification, especially in it to do with farting, um, somehow without it sort of making me anxious or nervous. So I sort of Googled it and then just found that there was like a community of people on Twitter who were really aroused by farting and were willing to pay women to film themselves and send them that. Um, and it was very easy for me to do. So I thought I would get into that. And I encouraged my flatmate at the time when I was at university to do the same because, when you're studying, you don't have a lot of money or a lot of time to work. So it became kind of like a fun thing where we would like joke and be like, "Oh, it's so funny that these men like get aroused by that. That's hilarious." And I'd be like, "Yes, that's funny, and that's not something that's also happening with me." So I would just sort of pretend with her that it wasn't arousing for me, and I just didn't really care about the money because it wasn't for me. The motivation wasn't to be paid; it was just to enjoy this sort of transaction of like knowing that people were sexually aroused by me farting or that they were touching themselves over those videos was like really arousing for me. So, um, and I also felt that comfort of like having a friend who I could talk to about the videos and about our experiences and things like that. Um, but after time, it just became something we just didn't really keep up with. Something that I would go back to a couple of times, but she kind of was like, "I'm not really making that much money, so like I'm not bothered." Whereas for me, it was like, "How do I keep doing this?" Or find a space where I can do this where I was just sort of I think in the back of my head I was hoping maybe I'll find somebody who's willing to pay who's also just so happens to be in the local area and just so happens that I'm also attracted to them, and then I can date them.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. So there's mainly a lot of people who were interested, lived sort of in the north of England, which the complete very, very far away from me. All were based in the US, and I wasn't going to get on a plane anytime soon. So that kind of fizzled out, really.
For sure, for sure. In your experience, in your opinion, do you think there are a lot of women that are interested, even perhaps enthusiastic about farting?
I think so. I'd like to hope so. I definitely encourage my like friends and people to do so. But I think the main thing stopping people is just the shaming. Like I know so many women, like so many of my like friends have told me that they've been dating men who have said to them like that they think that farting or burping is disgusting, and then they're just coming back from a date saying to me like complaining that they're in physical pain because they've been trying not to, and they can't see how this relationship is going to continue if they're not allowed to do that, or if they're going to be sort of berated for it. So I think a lot more people would be happier and more relaxed if they were told this is the safe space for you to fart. So um, I think it's a matter of verbalizing it because a lot of the time as well, I think people just presume it's something that they shouldn't do, so they don't. I know, unfortunately, know men and women who have dated people and not like for years and are adamant they've never farted in front of their partner, which is like just for me, just I don't know how that's possible. I think they must be, but they must be just trying to make sure it's a quiet one. But yeah, so I think there is. There's definitely some sort of excitement within queer communities as well, because I find kink is oftentimes more um, appreciated and not shamed really in more of the queer community. Whereas like with heterosexual relationships and sex, I find that um, fetish and kink for me, from my experiences, has been shut down quite a bit and kind of discouraged um, and treated as if it's something that's strange as opposed to something that's just a way of like really increasing your pleasure, and it's a lot more fun doing things that aren't just penis and vagina sex, but a lot of people can't see past that in terms of sex. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was I'm probably not my only, but that was my issue with my last partner is I'm pretty fetish and kink driven, almost to an ace I would almost say asexual, unless there's like a dominating element involved.
Mm.
And for her she was much more like I'd like to maybe add that to a regular sexual rapport, and we just did not have a match there in terms of like me not being excited for penis and vagina sex. It's just like I can do it. I can be the rod, but I don't have much like enthusiasm or excitement for it. And yeah, that I think it is sometimes a block for some partners. It is somewhat why I feel like the only place to perhaps find partners is in within like local kink communities and what have you. The only issue there is the people who are not even into but even aware of fart fetish is so low. But potentially why this show exists, to hopefully spread the message of our existence between the golden shower fetishists and the scat fetishists exist
Yeah.
us, you know. um uh you mentioned one thing I picked up on from your messages, that I was curious more about is you'd mentioned farting as a safe way to enjoy sex because it's not a sexual act as far as society is concerned. Can you talk more about that? Like, does society's view of something affect your willingness or desire to participate?
Definitely. Like, there's a lot about society that I just disagree with. Like capitalism is a big one.
Yes.
You know, it just I find it hard to exist in a world that's sort of so mediocre in terms of like our whole life seem to be dependent upon working jobs and making money and having families and or everybody's self-worth is based on do you have property, do you have a child, do you, it's just very two-dimensional. And not to say that those things aren't, wonderful for a lot of people, but they're not very accessible either. Like, we don't, for a lot of people, having a child or having property isn't an option because you don't have the money to do it. So um I feel like we're in a very sort of depressing sort of period of time. And I think a lot of people of my generation need some sort of outlet. For some people, it's partying, it's drugs, it's that kind of stuff. For other people, it's just going to the cinema. But like for me, it's like I just really enjoy doing things that are so harmless but so fun. You know, I really enjoy doing things that I'm told I shouldn't do, um, that aren't isn't hurting anybody basically. Like I oftentimes in many settings, whether it be in work settings or in friendship groups or in any kind of thing, I'm oftentimes discouraged from being dominant. So like I really enjoy exploring that in a space that feels safe and enjoyable. And I do think like a big part of the fetish for me um is that people have told me not to do it. So I want to do it. Um I think for a lot of people in sort of kink spaces, um that is a big element. Like um a lot of people who have been submissive for me in their day to day, that is not how they behave. They are expected to be in charge and powerful and whatever. And they're happy to do that at work, but people are multifaceted. They're not oftentimes one or the other. It's nice to see somebody, experiencing pleasure and enjoyment out of just exploring things. And I find that, you know, there's so many sort of layers to it, even like gender expression. So many people are discouraged from expressing themselves. Like trans people currently live in a society that is so dangerous for them. And like, you know, I'm sure a lot of people don't want to be open about how they would like to express their gender and their sexuality because it doesn't feel safe. So a lot of people enjoy that in a setting where it is safe. And I'm happy that there is that space, but I also wish that like it was just more normalized generally and that people could really live their lives to the fullest, because it's oftentimes so sad to know that like I recently had an experience with somebody who basically had been really trying to like suppress their urge for wanting to be dominated by women and really trying to, even in on dating apps, would state they're a switch and, trying to like it more, but it was just becoming so, yeah, depressing for them that they then just had this hiatus of just not dating because they thought, well, I'm not getting what I need, so I'm just not going to do it. And I've done the same where I've been like, maybe it's just easier not to date at all. But then we found each other, and realized that, actually we deserve more than what we had been having before, and that it is possible. You just have to be so patient and so explicit to people. It's basically, if you want to enjoy fart fetishes, I think you can't be shy. You have to be forward with it. And that's the way that we ended up meeting and sort of indulging in that. And I now have very much got to the point where I'm like, well, I know I can have it, so why would I ever deny myself of that ever again?
That's great. That's great. I really appreciate everything you've delved into there. Especially in 30 odd episodes, you are the first guest to call out capitalism before I do. So I really appreciate that. Um, and I think it's funny because I think a lot of people who aren't of this mindset, this more anti-capitalist, maybe not fully, but whatever the case may be, on that spectrum of anti-capitalism, I think they're confused why it always comes up, and it's the factor, at least as far as I'm concerned, at least as far as I understand, is that capitalism kind of the overarching problem that leads into a lot of the other problems. Some of the ones that stick out for me off the top of my head are the patriarchy, white supremacy,
Mhm.
even commodification of bodies, which are people like, oh, why are people on OnlyFans? It's like, well, people need money, and if that's
Yeah,
something that is accessible to someone, desirable from other people, it makes sense. It is part of the construct we've created in this capitalist kind of hellscape. So I think when people are confused about why capitalism always comes up, it is because it feeds into really all the other negatives that we live under.
completely. I think, you know, people might think, well, these are sort of constructs, but it's like, no, but this is how we're living. This is how everything we do goes into that. When it's the weekend and you think, oh, I should be being productive instead of just resting because I'm tired because I've worked a 5-day week and I work in healthcare, and I should be producing something. Maybe I should do a painting because then I'm more, I haven't wasted the weekend. And it's like all those acts are because we are taught that we are useless human beings unless we are providing something. And it's so depressing, and it really comes out in sex as well. If you're not producing a baby, why are you doing it? Which is crazy to me because it's like, well, you should, you know, you should be enjoying sex because it's pleasurable, and that involves, that then weaves into why I think we shouldn't prioritize putting a penis in a vagina, because you don't have to do that to have enjoyable sex. And it comes back down to that sort of playfulness. Like, I now engage in things like painting, because I just like it, not because I'm good at it, and not because there is a goal at the end of it to be like, well, I need to get good enough that I can sell it, and then that will be a thing I do on the weekends. And it's like, that is so sad to me that is encouraged. So I really, whenever my friends say to me, "Oh, I'd love to do that, but I'm not good at it," and I'm like, you don't need to be good at something to enjoy it. And the whole point of it is just, yeah, I really feel like as soon as you get into adulthood, everything like that is just discouraged. And then of course, if you're doing that in your day to day, it's going to bleed into your sex life. It makes sense that it will. And then it sort of becomes, people end up in relationships where, even though I think it's good to communicate, how often you might need sex or something like that, I think couples sort of especially when it's heterosexual, get into sort of relationships where it's like, okay, once a week we are going to have sex, and it becomes again just like a product and just something that's not raw or real. And yeah, even things like, being like, oh, on Saturday I'm going to have sex, so I need to remove my body hair and I need to like buy some nice lingerie. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with being hairy or being smelly or, being a human being. Um, and though that kind of sex can be so much more enjoyable, like genuine, spontaneous acts can be so much more fun. And I find that I always try and pull it out of people. Like, even if I'm having casual sex with somebody and it's quite vanilla, or even though what is vanilla, but I guess just seen as like not particularly kinky, I'm always asking them, particular questions like, what is it about other people that makes you aroused? And is there anything that people do that turns you on that's not sexual and you don't know why? And then I just want to explore it. Like, there are so many things for me that do that. Like, I remember, I it was a long time ago. I was living with a few people, and it was three guys, and one was very good at cooking, and he had his girlfriend over, and he'd cooked this amazing risotto, and he'd taken up all the kitchen space. And I was saying to my other flatmate, like, I can't believe he hasn't offered me any of his food. He just spent the whole evening cooking. Now I have to make like toast at 9 p.m. because he's spent so long cooking and I can't eat. He's not offered me the food. And then him and his girlfriend obviously were upstairs at this point that I'm just talking behind his back. And my other flatmate just got a spoon, put it in the risotto, and just said, "Eat it." And I was like, "No, wait, I can't do that. That's, that it's his food." And he was like, "He's not going to notice if you have a mouthful. I think you should eat it." And I ate it, and it tasted even better than I thought it would. Probably because I thought, well, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Um, and it was so arousing. It was one of the most sexy experiences I've had in my life. And then, like, yeah, he was just feeding me that, and then the flatmate came downstairs and he like chucked the spoon away, and we just pretended we were making our own dinner and like nothing happened. And those experiences, I think, are just really important to have. And I feel like you don't always get those when people have a really rigid idea of like what is right, what is wrong in terms of things that don't hurt people and are just silly rules. Alongside, yeah, I think it all goes into capitalism, really. Why aren't we sharing dinner? Why does it have to be that each person makes their own dinner and keeps it for themselves? It's so based on individualism, and I just hate that. I just think, what if one person wants to cook a great meal, please can we all eat it? He's made so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I think that that's too, I think there's a strong like in encouragement to tell people to like be present, but not enough like lessons or instruction on what that means or what that feels like. Even in some ways, that's almost commodified. It's like, oh, come to my class, I will teach you how to be present, and then you actually don't have the skills necessary to be present for whatever reason. And it's kind of it may be a little more of a wilder take, but it's kind of why I've taken this idea, at least for now, for the time being, that I don't necessarily believe in karma. And the reason I say that is because I think people think of karma as far too spiritual, far too outside of ourselves. When my thought or conception of karma is we're the karma. We're the karma when we hold the door open for someone else. We're the karma when we do good things for other people without expectation. And I think people only tend these days to recognize karma when it is coming to them and not when they are giving it to others.
Definitely. And it is, I think that's like a big thing for me in terms of dating and relationships, that I find a lot of people, especially in Brighton where I live, it's classically known for being very liberal, but it's also very, it's considered sort of like fake liberal in terms of it's so performative. You oftentimes find people who seem deem themselves to be a good person and that they're kind, but it's like genuine kindness is so hard to find. It's so oftentimes, people will work a food bank, but they'll film it and they'll put it on their Instagram story to be like, I'm good. And it's like, can you not do anything just out of like I can't relate to it because I oftentimes I get this sort of craving and this built up feeling that I just want to give things to people. And once I've given them that, I then relax and that feels good. I don't feel like I give them that and then I'm counting down the days until they give me something back. And it's yeah, I think it's part of the reason why I also work in healthcare because I really I enjoy giving. And I think another part of that is probably within my job, I give a lot of empathy and affection, but also I cause people a lot of pain because I do things like blood tests and other things like that. And I think that is like the most ideal thing for me because it helps people, but it does hurt a bit. And I think that that keeps me working because I hate working. But I don't hate this job because I'm enjoying it genuinely because I'm getting my needs met. And I think if there wasn't so much shame and criminalization of sex work, then I would probably be doing that instead. But things like trying to find housing, if you tell a landlord that you're doing sex work is not possible. Like you would have to, lie, say you're a dancer or you do something else like that. And it's so sad that it's like something it just infuriates me because the same politicians who, criminalize sex work are the same politicians who are found out to be watching pornography in their office. And I'm like, do you criminalize it so you get it for free? But then for the actual people doing the work, like it's that attitude is it's just very ridiculous to me. And I very much prefer sort of dating people and being friends with people who do pay sex workers because I think, well, one, it's a service you're paying for. To me, it's as normal as buying a sandwich. Like if you want it, buy it. Like,
Yeah.
and if you want a really good like version of that, of course we can all make a sandwich at home. But if you want a specific one, then why would you not pay for it? It seems ridiculous to me that there's so much shame around that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, capitalism is an endless pool of
Mhm.
dark topics.
Definitely.
Getting back to fetish sexuality, is there a part of your or any part of your fetish or sexuality that you feel like you struggle with or don't understand?
I think so. For a long period of time, I sort of was like, can this not be something that arouses me? Because it would be so much easier if that was not the case. Um, and I often tried to like suppress it, but the problem is when you try and avoid it and think, no, I'm just going to engage in sort of standard sex, it then becomes even more arousing to you because it's something that's even more hidden and you then are like, oh, maybe when I'm by myself, I'll look at pornography or something like that involves that. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of tricky. I also find that um, there are loads of people who like to be submissive but do not like anything in the realm of any sort of toilet area. They don't want farts, they don't want piss, they don't want shit, they don't want nothing in that realm, and that's fine. But for me, it's like something I really feel like I need um, in a sexual partner now, especially now that I know it's possible to enjoy. Um, yeah, and it's kind of like I think as well having sex with people who have fetishes has really changed my attitude towards it. Like I've had sex with a lot of people who have a foot fetish because I would say it's really quite a popular fetish, and seeing someone in their element and being so aroused and sort of expressing themselves in such a primal way is the one of the most attractive things I've ever seen a person do. And I thought, you know, that is so gorgeous, and I really think that more people should indulge in it. So that kind of has overridden the shame and the sort of practicality of it, I guess. that annoys me, but I also am so aware of how beautiful it can be to indulge in that, and that's really sort of encouraged me more.
That's great. That's really great. Who do you recall the first person, real fictional, that you recall being attracted to?
That's a very good question. Um, there's quite a lot. I remember like one of the first people was attracted to was my English teacher, so that's probably concerning. Um, so I remember that, and yeah, it was awful because I remember, oh my God, like nothing ever happened, of course. Like it was just as simply I had a crush on a teacher, but I remember at the time telling like an adult, like, oh, I have feelings for him, and they were like, he's a 40-year-old man. So yeah, that was concerning. I've always had really weird crushes, and I don't really know why. I went through a phase of being really attracted to magicians, and that I'm still embarrassed by. But for some reason, I just found doing magic tricks was very impressive to me. And always queer men as well. Darren Brown was like, I was like, wow, he's he's so amazing. He's so intelligent and like, and he loves men and same. Like, it was very very strange of me. But then in terms of like cartoons, I think I remember it would always be or like TV shows, it would always be brothers and sisters. Probably even more concerning, but I used to really enjoy Avatar, The Last Airbender, and I used to think Sokka and Katara were like my ideal boyfriend girlfriend, like even though they're brother and sister. Um, and also with like Wizards of Waverly Place used to be like a show I used to enjoy, and I always fancied both Alex and Justin, like the brother and sister. So it tended to be a combination of people for me when it was um, sort of fantasy, but then in reality, it was just weird, weird things for my age, I think.
For sure. I mean, that seems like a makes sense fantasy of a dominating a brother sister couple. I mean, or not couple, but brother sister pair, as it were. It seems like there's a theme there. I like that.
I think so, and I think it's like I don't know why I'd always be by. I think I liked that aspect. I think in TV shows you always get a very clear sort of I guess portrayal of like masculinity and femininity, and I like all of it. So I just would always be like, well, I'll have both, please, because they were so enjoyable. But also, I found that like in those sort of depictions, especially with Alex and Justin, it was more like Alex was who's the sister was more dominant, and Justin was the more sort of caring one. And I really, really like that. A big part for me is people sort of defying roles of what's expected of them. And I really liked that Alex was more of a considered like a tomboy, and Justin was sensitive, or like, these are very silly concepts to me and not necessarily things I believe myself, but I really enjoyed enjoyed that a lot, and I still do now. I very much enjoy um ambi like ambiguity, and people really being very fluid in their sexuality and in their gender. It's always been a very enjoyable thing for me.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Are you in, or do you feel you have a community you're part of that's around the fetish?
Not really. Um, I tend to I have like people that I chat to who are like around the UK who also have the fetish. But I can never really find people locally, and when I do, it's very few and far between. And usually, it's like I've tried things like FetLife and Fields, like the dating app, and I'm very explicit on both. I'm not shy about it. I don't think, I know a lot of people, especially with dating apps, would think, Christ, there is no way I'd be saying interest fart fetish or something like that. But for me, it's like, I just don't have any shame around it anymore. And I don't, even with work, I'm like, they don't, all of them are married. I doubt they're going to be searching the internet to try and find my dating profile. And even so, if they confronted me, I'd say, well, I'm in my right to express and enjoy my sexuality. I don't see how that has anything to do with my job. So, yeah, but even by doing that, it's still hard to find people a lot of people, um, yeah, aren't very open about it. And then when I do connect with people, I find that usually it's either people I'm not particularly attracted to, because maybe they have the fart fetish, but their morals are like not, they're very, if they're quite a conservative person, then I'm immediately like, ew, I do not want to be farting around them. I don't think they deserve that. So, you know, it can get, it can be really tricky trying to find that combination of like somebody that you genuinely get on with and enjoy, and also just so happens to have a shared fetish. Yeah, it's very tricky. And I think as well from like a the perspective of a woman, even on like things like fet life, I get, like, not to sound really wanky, but I get a lot of messages, um, and a lot of the profiles are anonymous, and it's of a bunch of different ages, and ages I wouldn't be dating, whether it be, you know, 19 or something wouldn't be an age that I would date, but also like somebody in their 60s again is not somebody who I would be dating. So it gets very, I get a very clogged up inbox, and then I can't really make, it's very hard to make the connections with people. Um, and so it can be a bit tiring. And I think as well, a lot of people do think that women are just doing it for money. So a lot of people ask, "Oh, do you sell content? Can you sell me some content?" And it's like, no, I mean, I could, but I don't really want to. I just want to connect with somebody who wants me to fart in their face. It shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. I hear that for sure. What do you feel is the closest you've felt to like fully immersing yourself, whether it be in sexual expression, fetish expression, maybe both?
So I would definitely say a recent sort of relationship that I've had. It's been just a sort of it's so hard because there's so many labels and things like that. I would say it's sort of a casual arrangement. We both really enjoy each other as people, share very similar sexual interests, but we're just on different paths in our lives, which involves that person moving to up north. So apparently, everyone in England who's kinky lives up north. So I'm gonna have to move at some point. But I found that with that person, it was really freeing because it wasn't just that they were like, "Oh yeah, I could probably get into that." Like, it was very much encouraged, and it was so enjoyable having somebody literally thanking me for like farting on them, and them telling me that, like sexting me saying like, I'm obsessed with your scent, and like, I want you to do that to me again, but we should do this, like, and having that sort of shared excitement around it, and just no shame. I really, really appreciate and enjoy, because I've had other experiences where it's sort of been a trade off, where we both have specific fetishes and we're both very open people. And it's like, okay, you can fart in my face if you also piss on me. And then I'm like, cool, so I can fart in your face if I piss on you. It's like, it's nice to be experiencing a situation where it's like, it's not it's not a trade-off. It's not, "Oh, I'm open to it," and then you feel really uncomfortable because when you're doing it, you can tell that person is just like, not that they're not enjoying it, but they're just like, could take it or leave it kind of thing. They're just like not bothered. Um, it's really nice to have someone who's as enthusiastic as myself. That's definitely made me a lot more hopeful, I think, in terms of dating, because it often happens where I date people and then I bring it up and it's not something they're into, which is fine. But also, ideally, I don't really want to be like, oh, this is my girlfriend, this is my boyfriend, but I also have another partner who I just fart on. Like, I'd rather it be just one person, ideally. But it's very hard. It's very hard to come by.
For sure. For sure. That makes a lot of sense. What, if anything, do you feel has helped you grow the most in terms of like fetish or sexuality?
I think surrounding myself with the right people. Like, I've stopped having sex with so many cis straight men. And that's been a big game changer. Like, it's been very enjoyable to have sex with, you know, a variety of genders and a variety of sexualities. Um, yeah, it's been really wonderful to experience. Even like I would consider myself to be um a person who is um aroused often. I don't like to say high sex drive because I don't think that's an accurate measure of, there's so many contextual things, but I think I'm just a person who contextualizes a lot of things to be sexual that just don't need to be. So I can often be aroused, but that doesn't mean that like I haven't had really fulfilling experiences with people who are on the asexual spectrum, or people who, have sort of similar match me in a similar way. Like for me, I've just it's been really important to me to actually expand the people that I'm having sex with and experience more than even just my fetish, but just to experience people in a way more flexible way has been really good. And it's hard because there's a lot of things like internalized homophobia and stuff like that, and just the way that romance is depicted in films. You're encouraged as a woman to always pick a man. So like oftentimes I would be, you know, in a situation where there would be a non-binary person or there would be a woman who's interested in me, but I've just, called things off and just stuck with a guy because it just seems like that's what's encouraged of me, and that it seems like easier, which is just not true because now that I have experienced dating people of all genders and sexuality, it's actually easier to date people who I feel like so comfortable and safe around. And then it's like if you feel that as a baseline, it's so much easier to then explore fetishes and kink because ideally, I don't wanna be doing that with somebody who I don't feel safe around.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that makes a lot of sense too, even in terms of, like, I've noticed in my own life in terms of, like, friendships where you have a it's weird to call it a status, but you've reached a status with someone where you believe you're friends, you hang out a lot or whatever, and yet you actually don't feel like you know them at all. Like, oh, you talk about
Mm.
politics, you talk about this and that, and yet you don't really feel that openness and that comfortability around them as if they've as if you've both let your guards down completely and can
Mm.
like not like you're not no one's let's say it's a business friend and whatever, and you're not like gonna say something that they're gonna use against you later, like, oh, you said this at this
Yeah.
meeting and now I'd like to change our deal or whatever. Yeah, it is very different when you have because I only typically make real close friends or I'm not friends with people. I'm a very much of
Mm.
like not in the middle. I really like open people. So yeah, in exploring some more relationships lately, it's interesting to see that you can offer all your openness to someone and they may still remain closed off. Like they may seem like they're meeting
Oh,
you
yeah.
and yet they're not anywhere near where you are.
I find that so dissatisfying out of relationships, and it's happened quite a lot where I've sort of adopted people as friends out of, um, maybe necessity, even just like, moving in with a group of people, and you're trying to sort of have these conversations and like they will not put their guard down with you, and it's like that's just to me that's just it doesn't feel as valuable. And like I want to feel like I have connections with people where we can just sit in silence and there's nobody's worried that the other person's pissed off, or um it's just it's so um again it always comes back to capitalism, but I feel like you know, friendships are almost seen like, "Oh, what did you do today? What did you do with them?" And it's like, "Well, nothing." Like we just sat on the sofa, we read our books separately, and had a cup of tea, and that was it. Like it's always seen as like, "Oh, you should do this. You should go and do this with your friends. You need to spend money and do that and do this." And it's like I feel like there's so much more satisfaction that comes out of relationships where you can just be, and it's so rare, especially like I think when we don't get to do that with our family or in work settings where you fully just exist and that person like really truly adores you, um just in that state. And now that I have that more so, I'm very, yeah, a lot more sort of picky about people I want to spend a long period of time with. Um, and I've never been more happy, because I think it's more important to have less friends who you genuinely are friends with than to just, have loads and loads of acquaintances. It doesn't feel as meaningful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it does indeed always come back to capitalism. I feel that way as well. You talked a bit about your I would say your past in terms of both comfortability and then waning comfortability around farting. This question is I'd more how you approach it these days. Would you say you're like pretty public or private about this fetish? Like especially if maybe the sexuality topic comes into the conversation. Like how do you approach it these days?
I'm very, very open, but it depends on the person for sure. If like I wouldn't bring it up at like work, even if a colleague is really comfortable with me and is chatting about sort of their sex lives and things like that. I think the most I would go into is hinting that I'm more into dominating. Um, But when it comes to friendships and things like that, I am very, very transparent and open, and I'm happy to talk about it. I even at one point, like, I had this sort of we had last Christmas, it was just me and my friends, and I bought this hoodie, like a jumper that said, "Ask me about my fetish," which went down very well in terms of just Christmas fun. But it would oftentimes people would be like, "What is your fetish?" And I'd just say to them, "That's actually very personal. Like, that's not really something you should be asking." And that was the running joke for the entire evening. But if I was like, if you seriously would like to know, we can have a conversation about this. But I just I very much I try to like flag my fetish a lot. I even have like my keys for like work and home have like a little what I don't know what it'd be called, a keyring thing that has a little like heart on it that just says I heart to fart. And like I just hope that people will see it and ask me. Like I'm so yeah, I'm very much a person who will wear clothes or badges to literally try and encourage people to talk to me about it. Um, just to also, I think it's the best way to connect with people who have the fetish because how else would you know? You just don't know unless you ask, I think. And unfortunately, I think the worst thing that could happen is that someone says no, and that's fine. Like I'm very confident and like it's taken me a long time, lots of therapy and things like that to get to a point where I'm so sure of myself, that, if I was to bring it up with a partner and they were like, "Oh no, I don't find that attractive," I'd just be like, "Okay, that's fine." Each to their own. Like, doesn't bother me. I just always like to see if that's an option because it's something that is important to me. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of people sort of feel a lot more pressure and be like, think that's never something I could bring up with somebody or it would take years. But I'm like, it's the same. You're going to get the same reaction, I think. People will giggle, people will be kind of shocked. And if they're blushing, you know that that's also something they're attracted to as well. And that's fine. Like, so I think there's no point in waiting. I think life is very short and I think it's very important that people prioritize their pleasure. So I think if for anyone who's sort of listening and never ever told anyone, I think it's worth telling people because it's not that deep. It's not that deep if you're interested in something sexually and other people aren't, that's fine. And it's not hurting anyone. So it's like the worst thing that can happen, maybe somebody's like shows they're like, ew, that's gross. Okay. I like gross stuff. So that's just a different thing between us. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm glad you said that, and that was a great way to put it because I yeah I agree. I think there's a lot of I don't know if it's a holdover from like primary school of like, oh, now once I've been shamed, the whole school's gonna know or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what the holdup is because I mean I feel it too. It's not like I'm of total comfort, and yet yeah, we're adults. The fact that we tell someone and someone doesn't like it is like it's not like they're gonna I'm gonna text everybody I know or whatever. It's like Yeah, I think there is a lot of unfounded fears around sharing. And I think what's also I haven't told like a tremendous amount of people, but I've told people at like kinky speed dating and things like that.
Mm.
And no one's ever been like, oh my God. Or they've always been very respect. I mean, I've never met anyone who's been like, I like that a lot. But all the same, they've no one's ever been disrespectful. And even telling, certain friends, always been some have more questions than others, but it's certainly not anything where someone's like, I can no longer befriend you or no longer know you because you like this thing.
No, not at all. I find it's a lot. I think we're all too concerned about ourselves. If anything, even if a person was like, oh, that's great, they might be thinking, it might be coming from a point of shame with themselves and then thinking, God, I've never experienced anything in that realm in terms of having sex in a way, with things that are considered non-sexual, and they might be feeling insecure. A lot of people, I think, especially now that kink and fetish is definitely more of an open conversation. I think a lot of people who aren't interested in it become quite defensive and embarrassed. Um, so then will, try and shame you, but then sometimes realize that's just not possible. um, and that so there's so many things and reasons why people react in certain ways, but generally, yeah, as adults, I think people just are too. Everyone's tired. We're not bothered if somebody says, "Oh, I really like doing this," and it's not something I'm interested in. If anything, I'm like, well, that's great for you. I'm really glad you get to enjoy that. That's important that you continue to enjoy it. And it's as simple as that. Like, yeah, I've never had um really shocked reactions. If anything, for me, it's just the disappointment of really enjoying a person and wanting to date them and realizing, okay, that I don't think I'm going to be able to sort of seduce them into thinking that farts are sexy. So like that's not gonna happen. That's the only thing that's been hard, which and like disappointing, but also um you could apply that to so many different things. Somebody who might be very passionate about, I don't know, musical theatre or something, might be dating someone and they say, oh, I didn't think Dear Evan Hansen was good. And then it's, the heart's broken and it's like, it's similar. It's similar. It's the same sort of thing. It just depends on what your values are and what's important to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could not put it better myself. You'd kind of touched on it a little bit, but you talked a little bit more in our emails. I'd love to know more that you said you started talking sorry, you said you started dominating both men and women. Can you talk more about that experience? Like how's it been going? How it feels?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's been lovely. It's been really, really enjoyable. But I find there's still that um societal aspect in my head. Like um I find it in a way easier to dominate men because I guess also because of my own experiences, I've experienced a lot of trauma and things like that from men, so it feels very therapeutic to inflict pain onto men. Um, and that's really obviously in a context like a consensual setting.
Sure, sure.
That's very important. But it's been like, yeah, that's been really quite therapeutic for me. And very enjoyable for people who love to receive pain because they're very much like, absolutely take it out on me. Like your general sort of hatred for for just men, I guess, can be taken out on me. Whereas with women, it's like, I think it feels like more of a game in a way. It kind of feels more like, when I was at school and, like, we're sort of being naughty in a way, and I feel like sometimes it's yeah, I don't always want to inflict pain on women, even if they're asking me to do that and that is what they want. I find it a bit more, um, upsetting to see women in pain, and I think that's just trauma. But um, it's definitely like the more I indulge in it, the more I can sort of find that enjoyment from it because a big part of me is and a big part of my sexuality is again just enjoying things that I'm not supposed to. So it's enjoyable whether it be, I'm dominating a man who, um, you know, it's just so funny. It's like so thrilling and funny to me when, like, there's like a person who presents themselves to the world as one thing, um, but secretly, like, I'm pegging them and, like, nobody knows. Like, absolutely love that. And it's quite similar to, like, with women, oftentimes people, or with non-binary people, depending if they present, more feminine, more masculine, people think we're just two best friends, or we're just, we're just roommates, but, like, secretly, we're doing very enjoyable things to each other. I think I love that element of shock, and that is, I think, a big part of sort of um, exhibitionism as well within me. I there's so many things I like. Voyeurism, I like watching. I like to be watched. There's so many things I enjoy about sex, and I think there's so much to experience and enjoy, and that's sort of a big part of me enjoying my sexuality and enjoying what, like, discovering what really turns me on. Um, And it really came as a shock, to be honest, when I first started doing it. Like, I remember, like, so, like, fully this experience I had with this guy who was like, we were having sex together, and he was like, I would consider myself to be a pleasure dom, so, I just want to please you in a dominant way. Um and he was just tying his shoelaces, and I was like, why am I more wet, like, and aroused, like physically aroused, when you're on your knees, than when you were just like, I don't know, sucking my tail or something. It's just like, it's very interesting. And then that sort of, I was like, I really should explore this, because clearly, something is going on. And it's happened so many times where I've, like, the sort of more standard parts of sex are arousing to me and are enjoyable, but I need that naughty context to, like, really get me off. Like, kissing is gorgeous and really, really enjoyable and can be so, so arousing. But it's so fun to have, like, an added element to it of, like, this is the role play that we're doing whilst we're kissing, or, like, you know, just context is so key to me. Even, yeah, like I said with that whole risotto thing, like, if the context is there, I'm aroused. Doesn't matter what their gender is. Yeah, it's all about context. I think that really encourages pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, in our email conversations, and I think a bit here as well, it's quite clear that finding a compatible partner, maybe compatible partners, is very important to you. Is there any more you could say about that? Your feelings or your desires, I suppose.
Definitely. Like, I think dating is really hard anyway. Like, just especially now, because since with the pandemic as well, I think dating is even more heavily relied upon being online, as opposed to in person, because it's really hard to find these sort of neutral spaces where you're not at work, you're not at home, but you're in a neutral space often where you could connect with people and meet people. But then on top of that, there's the element of, oh, but I want to date somebody who has a fart fetish, and that's, you can't really go down to the leisure centre and be like, do you have a fart fetish? Like, it's kind of not the place to really bring it up. But also, because I'm sober, I don't drink or do any drugs or anything. So, like, a lot of kinky spaces, especially in Brighton, are all in the evening, and they all involve alcohol. It's just, like, feels impossible to find those spaces. And I have a lot of friends who I've complained to about just wanting to meet people who are kinky and also sober. Um, and they are, there's been more events that they've been putting on, like film screenings and things like that. But they're very, very few and far between. Um, Again, it depends on what city you live in. But yeah, unfortunately, it's very associated with party life. And that's just, for me, that's not, I wouldn't even want to meet somebody in that setting, because I don't like clubbing. So it's like, ideally, I want to date somebody who, you know, not that they, couldn't enjoy that and also enjoy me, but it's like, I'd rather not give them the impression that's something that I really like.
Absolutely. That is very interesting. I apologize for almost interrupting, or
No.
interrupting. I was so taken aback because the kink dungeons and parties we have here are explicitly no alcohol. I think there may be, especially if they're a public party. I think if it's a private party, they might have beer, but I honestly don't think they do because there's a strong sense in the kink community. Part of the rack or rules, the social rules, as it were, to a kink is being responsible, and that includes not being inebriated, whether it be drugs or alcohol. That's not to say people probably haven't gone to the dungeon, smoked some weed. I'm sure I have smoked some weed before going to the dungeon, and then talking to people. I'm not one who plays generally when I'm at a party, but yeah. Uh, but I find it interesting that you say it is a generally a party scene place in the kink scene, in Brighton specifically. You'd mentioned because it is so the opposite here. It is very much like you cannot do that. You cannot reasonably consent if you do that, and the person cannot necessarily reasonably be safe in playing, being a dominant, if they're also inebriated. So yeah, that's why I was taken like aback for a second because I'm like it's kind of shocking to me.
I think it's UK culture, unfortunately, like, drinking is a whole like, in the UK, it seems like people don't really spend time with each other without alcohol as adults. It's so wild, like, it's so hard um, to find even just friends who just wanna go see a film or, like, go for, like, a coffee or something like that, because it's always the next step is, "Okay, do you wanna go to the pub?" Like, it and for us, a lot of kink settings, I think more so for the private ones, it's sort of the opposite, where I think the private ones here, um, would usually be no alcohol, whereas, like, the ones that are sort of held in, like, clubs and things like that. Um, it's a big part of it, and it yeah, then becomes really really hard to like establish groups and connections. There are like lunches and things like that that go on, but a lot of the ones that are local, it's just like old men and like
Sure.
no women. So makes me that I wouldn't feel safe. But like, yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the events that we've had, I think so. There's like polyglamorous and tramfrau and a few other things. Like obviously you can definitely go sober, but it's not a rule. It's certainly not a rule. So and the events are usually sort of involve sort of like DJ sets and things like that. And even though they're wonderful things for people to enjoy and things like that, there's especially in Brighton, I think a lot of the stuff that happens in London, um, not all of it is like hosted in Brighton because it's so hard to find a space that is like a dungeon where like the purpose is to talk about sex, enjoy sex and explore. It's really hard to find like places that will allow you to hire the space, whereas like because there's that other element of all people are paying for drinks and people are paying for the music or the performances and things like that, then that's sort of the only way people can um host their parties, which is really really sucks. But yeah, again, it's like I've never experienced a scene in London, so it might be completely different. I know that um, a friend who's lived in London, has lived in the US, said like the best experiences they've had has been in the US because they've had loads of daytime events where you can literally, you can go to a dungeon and have a good time, and then go home and go to bed at a reasonable time. But yeah, it's really rare in the UK, unfortunately.
For sure. For sure. Um, What as we come to our close of questions that I have anyways, first want to thank you for taking this time and sharing such deep insights with us, because it's not I mean, obviously we have great conversations on this show, but it's not often we get to talk with someone as enthusiastic about farting as you are, especially the gender you are, to be frank, um
Definitely, definitely.
so yeah, that's definitely great for everyone listening on the show, and I think definitely makes um my hope is more women like you feel more comfortable and
Mhm.
slowly start to break these barriers that are kind of societally constructed around us. Um
Definitely, I hope so.
what do you value and appreciate most about your journey into fetish and sexuality so far?
I think um, what I value the most and I sort of appreciate is um, the like patience I've had for myself because I've gone through so many phases of like shaming myself and trying to discourage myself and almost trying to like sexually train myself to be more aroused by more acceptable things and it doesn't work. It's similar, I think sexuality is something that should be, embraced and encouraged no matter what the interest is, as long as, again, as long as it's not hurting anybody. Obviously I do hurt people, but consensually hurt people. um, there's, no reason to not enjoy it. And yeah, I really think like life really is too short. It just is too short to not prioritize pleasure. And I think, um, yeah, I'm glad that I have been resilient and not got too down about it because I went through phases where I was like, I'm actually just not going to date anyone because I don't think it's possible to find somebody who will meet my needs. And I'm too tired of searching for it. I'm tired of having, you know, conversations with people who aren't interested in it, um, that I was like, I just give up. But now I've got to a point where I'm like, it is hard and you do have to be patient, but it is so worth it to have those experiences, that it just I don't care if the next if the next person I fart on isn't for 20 years, I don't care. Like I'm still gonna try and make that happen and make those connections. Whereas I think a few years ago I was just so mortified that it was something I was aroused by that I was just like, I'm just gonna ignore that. But I really think the more you ignore it, the more arousing it gets and the harder it gets to suppress it. And I don't think sexuality or pleasure and enjoyment should be suppressed. Um, it's it's very hard to come by nowadays to experience genuine pleasure and joy. And I think that's something that should be valued more than it is. I think, yeah, it should be a top priority. I think everyone should focus more on bringing themselves pleasure than they do, because a lot of people don't do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Could not agree more, for sure. Do you have an opinion on fetish or sexuality that you used to hold but you no longer do? And what made you change your mind, if so?
I think um, I used to be quite afraid of the idea of it. I remember for a long period of time, I was scared by even the term fetish because I thought, oh, well, I've heard that if you have a fetish, that's the only thing that can like get you off. Which is quite a rigid definition. I understand the point of it in terms of trying to differentiate between kinks and fetishes, in terms of kinks being more like things that arouse you and fetishes being more like if it's not involved within your sexual experiences, it's harder for you to enjoy it to the full to your full extent. But I think now I'm just like, whatever gets me off, and I'm going to continue to pursue it. And I do think as time goes on, interest and fetishes change. Like at the beginning of when I first found this arousing, like that was the kinkiest thing about me, and that was my main fetish. But I've developed like more things that arouse me and more interests and things like that. So it's like, um, I think it's been a really wonderful thing to indulge in, and just being more like accepting and neutral about it has been great. And it's actually led to me having the best sex of my life. So it really, to me, if there's anybody who is curious, I really do think it's worth exploring, and it's worth potentially mildly embarrassing yourself by telling a partner or telling a friend that that's something that you find attractive, um, because it's very worth the pleasure that you'll get from getting to indulge in it.
That's a great thought. That's a really great what do you call it? Encouragement. I agree. I definitely agree with that. My last question for you that I have is, what are your thoughts on the future of the fetish, whether it be for yourself or the fetish at large, for both?
I'm really hoping that a someone who can design apps makes a dating app for people with fart fetishes, because I think it's like amazing even that we have this podcast exists, because it's really opening up a conversation that just hasn't been happening. And it's so strange because I read, I mean, I couldn't tell you the source, it's probably not a reputable source, but I read this article that said that fart fetishes are like the second top fetish next to feet. And I just thought, how, if I can find like one person in the whole of Brighton who's interested. So it's yeah, it's really interesting in terms of, I think a lot more people enjoy it than all of us think. And I'm really hoping that um, it becomes easier and easier to connect with people who do have the fetish, because currently a lot of um, places that you can use for dating or connecting with people cost lots of money. And it's like, I don't think you should have to pay to just connect with people with similar interests, but also it's hard when there's not a safe platform that actually exists to have those conversations and connect with people. So I'm really, really fingers crossed, hoping that there will be more specific apps, because I oftentimes download it, delete it, whatever, with Field. But Field is like known for being a kinky app, but also a lot of people just use Field because it's just the next Tinder. It's just, oh, and more people on that, I'm going to download that. So like a lot of people aren't very explicit about their kinks and fetishes. So it's very, you have to sort of use a fine tooth comb to actually find people who have that same interest. But hopefully we will all just get over ourselves as a society and just realize that some people find it attractive when people fart, and that's fine.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think my best thought, and in terms of what this podcast is supposed to do, is I think there is a collective um, fear around revealing ourselves or being the first one to
Mm.
be like, oh, I have that. Maybe people in terms of foot fetish, I don't know if this was the thing, but I always look back to Tarantino, and that was maybe
Mm.
not done by him, but done for him. Just by what
Yeah.
he did in his movies, and people are like, I think, this thing. And then, I for me, I think that global conversation, that more people realizing, more people exposed to it, is what has pushed foot fetish, again, in my understanding, my view, into much more mainstream, even to say like foot fetish has almost become the default for weird
Mm.
fetish. It's either that or
Yeah.
cake farts in some case, because I know the
Mhm.
boys, I believe, had a scene like that, as I understand. So yeah, but it is, I think people are a little bit afraid to be like, I can't reveal that, but they're all looking to the other guy. It's like, oh, is he going to reveal it? Is he going to do it?
Mhm.
And then if we get enough people to embrace those, we may get people to ideally be more comfortable around talking about it, hopefully more openly. That's my hope.
Definitely. I think it needs to, yeah, it needs to become more mainstream. And even, I think also just society's attitude towards fetishes really needs to change because there is so much shaming around even what I would consider a more, um, like typical fetish, like a foot fetish. There's still so much like fear mongering around it and like this attitude of like that's dirty and that's, that's not, you shouldn't enjoy that in that way, or that it's weird in some way. But it's like, I just to me, I just can't comprehend that to be weird or strange. I think like it's more creative and sexy to enjoy things and see the like sexy part of things that aren't necessarily um seem to be a sexual act. I think that's a beautiful way of people's minds working. And there's historical, is it James Joyce? I think it's him. Maybe it's someone else who like wrote about their fart fetish, and it's like it has existed for a long time and it will continue to exist. I just hope that more and more people get to a point where it's as normal um, as anything. But again, we do live in a society which even standard sex is taboo and is it like a shocking thing to talk about. Whereas for me, it's like sex is as yeah, is as normal as eating or breathing. It's just a thing that people do. So yeah, hopefully.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a great place for us to conclude this. But Zara, I cannot
Mm.
thank you enough for coming on and talking to us once again.
Not at all. It's been lovely to speak to you.